I should have known better, but love makes you do irrational things. It clouds judgment and blinds you to consequences. I never believed in all that supernatural stuff before, but what I let happen changed everything. Lupita's eyes were hollow after the miscarriage. Our baby was gone, and so was her living spirit. It had been months since she'd last left the bathroom. Her sad, vacant eyes were always in a constant search for hope. Watching her spiral into despair was a unique kind of torture. I felt utterly helpless. I had tried everything: therapy, medication, time alone, time together. Nothing could pull her back. It was agonizing to see the love of my life wither right in front of me, haunted by the loss of the child we both wanted so desperately. So, when Greg mentioned an odd, uncomfortable solution, I clung to it. "You know, Jack," he said hesitantly, "there's this thing. They call it a humanized doll." "A doll?" I deadpanned, my skepticism evident. "Not just any doll. It'll look like the child you were supposed to have." It sounded ridiculous, but I was desperate. In seconds, I placed the order. I'll never forget the day the package arrived. A plain brown box, no label, no return address, just sitting there on the doorstep like a malignant tumor. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a doll so lifelike it made my breath catch in my throat. It had Lupita's soft brown eyes, my sharp nose, and a hint of a smile that was disturbingly real. When Lupita saw it, the wall she had built around herself cracked. She cradled the doll as if it were flesh and blood, clinging to it for dear life. It was the first time in weeks that I saw her smile, and for a brief moment, my heart swelled with hope. Maybe this would help her heal. Little did I know that moment of peace would be the last in our houses. The first night, I woke to find her in the rocking chair, the doll pressed against her chest. I thought it was a good sign she was talking to it, humming softly like any mother would. But as the days wore on, I realized this wasn't healing. It was something darker, something unexplainably wrong. Soon, my wife stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She wouldn't talk to me or anyone else. Every waking moment was spent with that doll. Feeding it, changing its diapers. Yes, diapers. She even named it Baby Blue. I didn't understand, but I was too afraid to ask, terrified of what she might say. Then came the night that changed everything. She came at me with a knife. "Stop it, Peta. This isn't real," I yelled, my voice cracking under the weight of my desperation. Her face twisted into something unrecognizable. A monstrous snarl curled her lips as she lunged at me. The woman who stood before me wasn't Lupita anymore. She was Baby Blue's mommy, consumed in body and soul. As I stumbled backward, my eyes flicked to the doll, and I froze. Baby Blue's glassy eyes shimmered with a dark intelligence, and its tiny mouth curled into a sinister grin. The room felt colder, as if the air itself had thickened with something malevolent. Was she possessed? The next day, I decided to stay home and watch. Everything went smoothly until nightfall. It must have been around 1 a.m. when the fire alarm jolted me awake. The kitchen was filled with smoke. Lupita had left a kettle on the stove and completely forgotten about it. "He's crying. He's been telling me I'm a bad mother," she screamed, clutching Baby Blue to her chest. My blood ran cold. The doll couldn't cry. It was impossible. But she insisted, her voice growing hysterical, rising in pitch until it felt like the walls would crack. I tried to snap her out of it, shouting that the doll wasn't real, that it was all in her head. But she wouldn't listen. Her face went pale, and she collapsed, cradling the doll like a real child. I called the hospital. They arrived just as I noticed the house had grown eerily quiet. It must have been around 4 a.m. when a strange noise filled the house. A sound that made my skin crawl, a faint, muffled cry, like that of a baby. My heart pounded as I listened, holding my breath. The sound was coming from the nursery. My hands trembled as I pushed open the door. In the dim light, I saw it. The doll was crying. I stared at it, horror-stricken as the soft wailing filled the room. Baby Blue's eyes, Lupita's eyes glowed red, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkness. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as I stepped closer. My heart raced, but I had to know. I picked up the doll, and the crying stopped abruptly. My hands shook as I examined it, feeling something hard beneath its synthetic skin. I tore it open. The thick, rubbery flesh gave way, revealing a small black device nestled inside. It was a camera. We had been watched the whole time. A sickening realization washed over me as I dug deeper into the doll. Whoever had been spying on us had turned our grief, our pain, into their twisted entertainment. I gathered the evidence, the doll, the camera, and contacted the authorities. We filed charges for invasion of privacy, harassment, and emotional distress. The cybercrime department tried to trace the website, but it led to a block. People who use the dark web are masters at staying hidden. We changed our house, our phone numbers, anything to escape those who might still be watching. Lupita is still undergoing psychiatric counseling, trying to cope with the loss of our child and the trauma caused by that doll. What I've learned through all of this is that grief is love with no place to go, but we can't let it define us or dictate our lives. As long as we're alive, we must keep living. Moving forward is the real meaning of life, no matter how many storms try to knock us down. A few weeks later, I received another text. It was from an unknown number. The message was simple: do not click on this link. But of course, I did. It redirected me to a YouTube video, grainy footage of a circus from the 60s in Bombay. The video title had a warning: do not fast forward past 221 seconds. Naturally, I skipped ahead to 221 seconds. I shouldn't have done that. At exactly that moment, the video froze. Everything seemed ordinary. Black and white footage, elephants in the background, a few clowns, and a large drum in the center of the screen. On the drum, scrawled in bold letters, was a single word: Comment 13. Out of curiosity, I scrolled down to the 13th comment. It was a link to another video. It led to one of my own YouTube uploads, one I had posted 3 days earlier. But something was off. It was my voice, but it sounded wrong, distorted, heavier, almost robotic. The video glitched, random numbers and letters flickering across the screen. Then it went black. When the screen flickered back to life, my home address appeared in bold, bright letters. I slammed my laptop shut. The notification read, "Hope I didn't scare you." I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should reply. But the unanswered questions from the last few days gnawed at my mind. Curiosity, they say, killed the cat, and I had way too many unanswered questions to ignore it. So I decided to engage. "How did you know my address? How did you tweak my video?" I typed, trying to keep the rising sense of panic in check. There was silence for a few minutes, agonizingly long minutes. Then, my screen lit up with a message. But it wasn't a reply. It was an image. My stomach flipped when I saw it. A gorgeous woman, practically glowing with that polished Instagram perfection, filled my screen. Long dark hair cascading over her shoulders, flawless skin, a body that would make fitness models jealous. She was wearing a white tank top over skin-tight yoga pants, posing provocatively. It was the kind of picture designed to elicit a very specific reaction, the kind you'd expect to find on certain types of Instagram accounts. But something was wrong. I couldn't take my eyes off her shirt. There, on the front of her top, was a symbol, a very specific symbol. It was one that only I knew. I wasn't staring at her chest because of her body. My focus was locked on the logo in the center of her tank top, the one I had created. The symbol wasn't some random design, it was one I had made for the novel I was writing. And that novel? It wasn't published yet. In fact, it wasn't even finished. I hadn't shown it to anyone, not a single soul. So, how the hell did she have it printed on her clothing? My pulse quickened. A chill ran down my spine. This was impossible. How did she know? My mind raced, desperately trying to rationalize it. A coincidence? No way. A hack? More likely, but still terrifying. Who was this woman? I snapped. Normally, I never lash out at women. I've always been polite, maybe even a little too passive. But this was different. I started typing furiously, my fingers smashing the keyboard as I fired off a barrage of angry, expletive-laden messages. You hacked my computer, didn't you? Is this some kind of sick joke? Answer me, I demanded, needing to know how she was doing this. Tell me the truth, or I'm going to the police. Her reply came quickly. Don't be afraid, babe. It's our little secret. That word, babe, made my skin crawl. Stop calling me that, I typed furiously. Just answer my questions. Her response was calm, unnervingly so. I already told you the answer. I stared at the screen, confused. What was she talking about? She hadn't told me anything. Just vague comments, flirtatious nonsense. What answer? Where? I demanded again. Didn't you read the 13th comment on that YouTube video completely? She replied. I felt a surge of frustration. Was this some kind of game to her? Reluctantly, I opened my browser and went back to the video she had tampered with. Scrolling down furiously, I found the 13th comment again. The last time I checked it, it had only been a link to the altered version of my video. But this time, there was something more. Don't scroll down to the 20th comment. My eyes narrowed. She was still playing with me, daring me to follow her cryptic instructions. Without thinking, I did what she wanted. I scrolled down to the 20th comment. Don't click on this link. Of course, I clicked it. The link took me to an old blog of mine. A blog I hadn't updated in 7 years. My heart thudded in my chest. What was this? How did she know about this blog? I hadn't even thought about it in years. There was a suggested edit on my latest post. I clicked on it, and a single sentence stood out in bold. Don't go into the edit logs of this blog. At this point, I was beyond caring about warnings. I was too deep into this nightmare to back out now. I opened the edit logs, half expecting to find something trivial, maybe another taunt. But what I saw shook me to my core. In a previous version of the blog post, there was a single line. Thank you for the delicious orange juice. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Slowly, I turned my head to the right. My glass of orange juice, sitting next to my keyboard, was empty. I hadn't taken a single sip. Meeting Kelly had felt like a dream. Not the good kind of dream, the weird, unsettling kind that leaves you feeling off kilter when you wake up. I've never been the kind of guy to get the girl, let alone talk to one. I'm a loner, the kind of person who prefers the safety of online interactions where I can hide behind my screen, where my awkwardness doesn't show. It's easier that way. That's how I found myself in a dark web chat room. I wasn't there for any specific reason, just boredom. Life had become monotonous. and the usual corners of the internet weren't cutting it. But that's where I met her. Kelly. Kelly was different. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever spoken to before. She was confident, funny, and she actually seemed interested in what I had to say. She didn't just tolerate my nerdy ramblings about obscure books or coding languages, she engaged with me. She made me feel seen, and for someone like me, that was everything. It didn't take long for me to start falling for her. She wasn't perfect, though. She had her struggles, just like I did. Kelly told me about her issues with hair loss, a condition that made her feel invisible and unattractive. She said no guy had ever looked at her the way she wanted to be seen. It hit me hard because I knew what that felt like. I knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to feel like you don't matter. We bonded over our shared feelings of isolation. The late-night conversations became more frequent, deeper, more personal. Before long, we decided it was time to meet in person. We picked an abandoned children's park in the middle of nowhere. It seemed perfect, isolated, quiet, no pressure. Just the two of us finally meeting face to face. I was nervous, but I couldn't wait to see her. When I arrived at the park, it was even creepier than I had imagined. The sun had just set, leaving everything in that strange twilight where nothing feels quite real. Rusty swings creaked in the breeze, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty playground. I sat on a bench, my heart racing, and texted Kelly. She replied quickly, saying she was walking because she couldn't catch a cab. I told myself it was fine, I could wait. But as I waited, something felt wrong. I noticed him, an old man sitting on a bench a little ways off. He was just staring at me. Not a casual glance, this was an intense, unblinking stare that sent chills down my spine. I tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. His stare felt invasive, like he was peering into my very soul. I texted Kelly again, telling her about the man and asking how long she'd be. She told me to wait a few more minutes, that she was almost there. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The old man's stare was drilling into me, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. Then he stood up. My heart skipped a beat. He started walking toward me, his eyes still locked on mine. Panic surged through me. I got up and started walking away, texting Kelly that I was moving to another spot. She told me to wait, but I couldn't. I needed to get away from him. I spotted a bus stop at the edge of the park, illuminated by a flickering streetlight. It wasn't much, but it felt safer than being out in the open. I made my way there, trying to calm myself down. When I reached the bus stop, I looked back. The old man was still standing across the street, watching me. But now he was grinning. That grin chilled me to the bone. It was as if he knew something I didn't. As if he was enjoying my fear. I needed to hear Kelly's voice. I needed to know that she was real, that this wasn't some kind of twisted game. But I didn't have her number. We had been so caught up in our chats that we'd never exchanged phone numbers. I cursed myself for the oversight and quickly texted her, saying the internet was spotty and asking for her number. The seconds stretched into eternity as I waited for her response. Finally, her number popped up in the chat. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number immediately. The phone rang once, then twice, and then I heard it. The ringtone echoed down the empty street, growing louder with each ring. My heart sank. I looked around, but the street was deserted. There was no one. No sign of Kelly. No sign of anyone. I dialed again, my fingers trembling. The ringtone started up again, but this time it was louder,